Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Beyond the Politics, our examination of the events happening right here in the Quinte region and the people who work so hard behind the scenes to make it happen. I'm your regular host, Paul Martin. Joining me, my regular co-host, columnist for the Belleville Intelligencer, Colin McKay.
Thanks, Paul.
And our extra special guest for this week, MPP for the Bay of Quinte, former sort of co-worker in the same broadcasting field as myself, years gone by, and the Minister of Children, Community and Social Services, Todd Smith.
Good evening, guys. I do miss those days, I gotta say. The early mornings were a little bit much, but the long hours now they're not so much.
You and me both. Though you still have quite a bit of time spent in front of the camera and the microphone these days, but we'll get to that a little bit later in the show too. Before we get into the bulk of the discussion, which of course will be on COVID and of course the Ontario budget that just passed as well, which has so many things, including some announcements made locally. There was brand new news happening in Belleville just today, where surprisingly, Councillor Ryan Williams announced that he was tendering his resignation effective immediately to focus on his upcoming campaign for a federal seat for the Federal Conservative Party of Canada. So, Todd, this is not your bailiwick per se, but you're the person we have in the chair, and you have covered these issues before as well. So what can you say about Ryan, and what do you think of the decision?
I think it's a smart decision for Ryan. You know, he's obviously going in, whole hog, with both feet, jumping into this federal race whenever it might actually begin. And I think that's the whole thing. It was going to be really difficult for him to be able to balance all of the responsibilities that he had as a Belleville councillor, and he was on a lot of committees. I mean, that's a major, major time commitment, being on all those committees. And I know how taxing a campaign can be, because I've ran 3 myself now. It's a wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning and go to bed at 11 o'clock at night, and you're working the whole time kind of thing. So if you want to be a legitimate candidate, pour your heart into it, which Ryan is that kind of a guy, right? He's going to go all in on this stuff. I think it's a smart decision for him to make, and it allows Belleville Council to move on as well. Obviously being a Conservative, I hope that Ryan is successful and then makes that his full-time career. But I think Belleville Council needs to have the stability that they need as well to move on, and I think they're going to move on the way that most people thought they might have moved on before the last one, and appoint the next in line.
Moving on to COVID, and speaking of things we learned we're not immune. The numbers locally have been quite good. We were one of a handful of areas advanced to green when the last province-wide lockdown was lifted. Mm-hmm. But that's changed in a big way, and so is our color, likely over the next few days. Mm-hmm. A week ago, we were at 6. And as of today, we're at 71 after 2 huge spikes. How much is that concerning for you? And how much is that still a sign that what's going on in the province is far from over?
Yeah, it is far from over. We're still in the middle of a pandemic. And I think, when you talk to some medical officials, and certainly we get briefed by them almost every day from our science table or from our health team or Ontario Health, we know now that we're not in classic COVID anymore. I call it. It's a year old now, classic COVID. We're in the middle of new COVID. We're in the middle of these variants, and they have become the dominant strain, and they're impacting a different population. Before classic COVID really ravaged through our long-term care facilities and our older population, they were the ones that were impacted most. Now a lot of those people are vaccinated as well, and what these viruses do is they mutate and they just look for a carrier. And right now, the carriers are young people. They're people that are 18 to 49, 59 years old. And those people are ending up in the hospital. And they're ending up in the hospital longer because they are able to fight the virus longer, which I suppose is a good thing. But that's really starting to put pressure on our intensive care units across the province, because when people stay in the ICUs longer, there's more people coming in, and we're seeing the caseload going up. So this is a brand new pandemic that we're in the middle of. And yeah, we were very lucky. I touched wood many times when I was talking on cabinet meetings about the state of Hastings and Prince Edward or Bay of Quinte, because we were green. I mean, the guys used to call me Oscar when I played baseball, but that was because I was a hot dog, like the Oscar Mayer Wiener. The guys in cabinet call me Oscar because more like Oscar the Grouch. I'm living in green, right? So we were very, very lucky, one of 2 areas that were in the green. But as of the spike that's just occurred, we could very, very quickly be pushing red or gray.
So that brings me to my point of the emergency brake. So how would that possibly work if in Ontario or even in an area, or going from, let's say, red to, it pretty much means you're going to gray, I think, pretty much. So is that fair? Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, so I think we've seen the emergency brake applied in different parts of Ontario. In Thunder Bay, about a month ago,
Sudbury, yeah.
Massive spike. Yeah, Sudbury, Temiskaming, like all of these areas in Northern Ontario that were in the green, quickly, like we have done over the last couple of days, gone from green to lockdown in no time. North Bay, Nipissing was the same way. Two different businessmen coming back from Dubai, living in the same apartment building, didn't know each other, had no idea they were both in Dubai. They both brought one of the variants back with them, and it quickly spread through their apartment buildings. Next thing you know, it's in the community. Nipissing is in a lockdown.
There was an announcement in Belleville, which of course was part of a provincial announcement on additional investment in creating more units for long-term care, because that was really the first battleground of the pandemic last March, April, May, especially where there's the largest number of infections and fatalities. So how much was that part of the whole strategy moving forward, which also helps address a shortage in general that's existed for quite some time?
Yeah, this was a campaign commitment. So, I mean, this goes back to 2018. There had been a real lack of investment in long-term care over the previous 10 or 15 years. So it was awesome to be able to be at Westgate Lodge and make that announcement with Greg Freeman. He's been working hard for a number of years now to get those extra beds there. So it's going to be a 160-bed facility, 4-story building overlooking the Bay of Quinte. It's going to be a really, really nice spot, and I was thrilled, and he was quite emotional about finally making this happen for his staff and the residents there as well and their families. But that was just one announcement. Daryl Cramp, my colleague in Hastings, Lennox and Addington, announced 2 new builds as well, one in Madoc, his hometown, one in Napanee as well, which is the sort of the center of his riding. And he had a couple of other announcements previously. So this was part of a 30,000 bed promise that we made when it comes to new facilities and new beds for Ontario. There had only been 611 new beds in the last 7 years of the previous government. And in this area alone, in the last 3 years, there's been almost 1,500 new beds. So we also had an announcement in Picton a year ago. So we're hoping to get all of these shovels in the ground, get these built. It's really, really important because there's already a long waiting list in this area for long-term care beds. And we have an aging population, a lot of baby boomers out there. I'm not looking at you, Colin, but they are soon going to need long-term care beds or that that care in your home. And so we've really, I believe, followed through on a commitment that we made. So
we spent the last segment talking about what else? COVID, and of course that was a major factor in the provincial budget that was just delivered. 186.1 billion. Deficit up to 33.1 billion. Certainly COVID plays a big part in spending, projected recovery. What was it like even being part of the process of putting this together? Because of course at this time last year, we knew nothing about what to expect. And certainly you couldn't know what was going to happen. But now you have a better idea of what could happen, and yet you still have to plan for any one of a number of things.
Yeah, and our Minister of Finance, Peter Bethlen-Falvey, loves it when I call him our socialist finance minister for bringing in a $33 million deficit, but he takes that personally. Never in our worst nightmares did we ever see this kind of a scenario playing out. When we were elected 2018, we were planning on reducing the deficit at that time and trying to get to a balanced budget. We're still focused on doing that, but so much is in the air as far as questions go. When are we actually going to be out of the pandemic? And so a lot of what we did and decided to do was to try and make sure that we were supporting businesses and supporting people so that when the pandemic is over, we're in a position that we can quickly move from neutral into first or second or fourth gear and get the economy going as quickly as possible. So a lot of it is support for businesses, it's support for people, and a number of different programs to make sure that people are trained for the jobs that we'll need to fill. And I mean, that was a problem before the pandemic hit. We had a lot of jobs that had been created, but we didn't have people to fill them. And so we have things like an on-the-job training credit, so retraining credit, a $2,000 retraining credit. That's just one of the many, many programs that's out there. So I mean, if you were thinking about, you know, taking up a skilled trade or going back to college, this is the time to probably do it, because there's a $2,000 credit there for you. And it'll be interesting to see what the federal Liberals do when their budget rolls around as well, because they've already indicated that they have a lot of money that they're going to be spending probably in similar places that we are.
Now, we just wrapped up talking about a very small part of the budget. I mean, it's $186 billion. There's so many moving parts. There was one other thing you wanted to talk about that specifically fell within the area of your ministry.
Yeah, as Minister of Children, Community and Social Services, I'm really, really proud of the fact that we were able to make a massive investment to help kids with special needs. So our children's treatment centers across the province that, you know, help kids that need occupational therapy and speech pathology and you know, get fitted for their wheelchairs or other prosthetics that they may need. They hadn't had an increase in base funding for more than a decade. So we were able to come through with $60 million a year for the next 4 years, a $240 million investment. And I'm so happy about that. I mean, you know, when you consider the fact that we're also building 2 new children's treatment centers in the province, one at Chio, which a lot of the kids from here might go to in Ottawa, the Children's Treatment Center of Eastern Ontario, and one down in Chatham, Kent as well, plus the new Grandview in Durham that's being built that was in last year's budget. You know, we've invested a lot in kids with special needs. And I know from talking to people like Lisa Cheshire, who I know you guys know, who works at the Children's Treatment Center, when I was able to call and tell them that their sector was getting that kind of an investment, they burst into tears. They were just so thrilled because they love those kids. And I love those kids too. I mean, I play Challenger baseball with them up at Loyalist College when we're able to do so, and look forward to really playing with them at the new facility, the Field of Dreams up by Parkdale. That's going to be amazing. It's beautiful, and they haven't had a chance to play on it yet because of COVID. But
well, thank you so much for coming in. I wasn't exaggerating when I said you were literally just on a call, and you're going to be going back to a call.
I will be going to a call
when this was over. So thank you for taking the time to tell us about everything in the budget and what's going on with COVID in the province.
Oh, great to do this.
You've been watching Beyond the Politics with Todd Smith.